The Tuesday morning rain had followed me all the way into Harrogate. By the time I sat down opposite Mrs. Patel, droplets were still clinging to the shoulders of my coat. I folded it carefully across my knees and tried not to look nervous. The branch was quieter than usual. A printer hummed somewhere behind the counter. A young man near the door was paying in a bag of coins. Outside, rain slid down the windows in thin gray lines, blurring the high street beyond. Between Mrs. Patel and me lay a transfer form. £74. Lou Bay. I had read the number several times before signing it. Even then, it did not feel entirely real. It was nearly everything I had left outside my monthly pension. Savings Margaret and I had built over decades. Money meant for repairs, emergencies, and whatever old age might bring. But Claire had said this was the last obstacle. Once the legal dispute was settled, her belongings would be released. Her late husband's estate would be unlocked. She would return to England, take the cottage she had rented, and finally move to Yorkshire. To May. My phone vibrated against the desk. Mrs. Patel glanced at it but said nothing. I turned the screen towards myself. A message from Claire. Please, darling, once this is paid, I'll be on the train north within days. We've waited long enough. I felt the familiar pull in my chest, that mixture of fear and hope she had somehow learned to create with only a few words. I typed back beneath the desk. I'm at the bank now. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then another message. I knew I could depend on you. I placed the phone face down. Mrs. Patel was studying the transfer details. She had known me for years, though not well. She had helped Margaret and me arrange a savings bond once. And later, after Margaret died, she had quietly changed the account into my name without making me explain more than I could manage. Now she tapped one line on the form. The receiving account belongs to a company called Northbridge Global Logistics. That's right. And this company is holding Ms. Morgan's belongings. Yes? Have you dealt with them before? No. But Claire has. Mrs. Patel nodded. She did not raise an eyebrow or speak to me as though I were incapable of understanding my own affairs. That mattered. I had already begun to fear people looking at me and seeing only an old widower with too much trust and not enough sense. She turned slightly towards her computer. Mr. Bennett, before I process this, may I ask you something rather unusual? I expected a warning about fraud, perhaps a question about whether I understood the risks. Instead, she said, what color is the front door of the house this woman says she has rented in Yorkshire? I stared at her. I beg your pardon. The cottage. What color is the front door? For a moment, I almost smiled. It seemed such an odd thing to ask. I knew the cottage. Gray stone walls, wooden beams in the kitchen, a little garden with a bench beneath the window, a spare room Claire said she would use for sewing. We had discussed the village pub, the bus stop, where we would put a bookcase. I had imagined repairing a loose cupboard hinge and carrying her shopping in from the car. But the front door, I could not picture it. I'm not sure, I said. Mrs. Patel looked at me gently. Then she turned her computer screen around. A photograph filled the page. I recognized it at once. Claire's cottage. The place she had said was waiting for her, outside a small Yorkshire village. Only the listing on the screen gave a different location. It was a holiday rental in the Cotswolds. My mouth went dry. That can't be right. I'm afraid it appears to be the same image. No. There must be another cottage like it. That is possible. But her tone told me she did not believe it. My phone vibrated again. Then again. I looked down. Have you sent it yet? The room seemed to tilt slightly beneath me. I looked from the message to the transfer form, then back to the photograph on Mrs. Patel's screen. For the first time since Claire had entered my life, I wondered whether she was moving to Yorkshire at all, and if the cottage was a lie, how much of the woman I loved had ever been real. 4 years earlier, before Claire, before the bank, and before that transfer form, my life had become very quiet. Margaret died after a short illness. One month, she was still complaining that I had left muddy shoes by the back door. The next, I was sitting beside her hospital bed, holding a hand that had grown lighter than I remembered. We had been married for 43 years. People often speak about grief as though it arrives in one great wave. For me, it came in small absences. The kettle boiling for one. Radio 2, playing in the kitchen with nobody humming along. A crossword left unfinished because there was no one to argue with over the answers. Our bungalow near Harrogate had once been full of ordinary noise. Margaret opening cupboards, the grandchildren running down the hall, Helen calling from the kitchen to ask where we kept the serving spoons, Sunday lunches that lasted too long and left every surface covered in plates. After Margaret died, the house became painfully tidy. Nothing was ever out of place because there was nobody else there to move it. For nearly a year, I kept her blue dressing gown hanging on the bedroom door. I told myself I simply had not got round to putting it away. The truth was that I liked seeing it there in the mornings. For a few seconds after waking, it allowed me to forget. I also continued buying 2 kinds of marmalade. I preferred smooth. Margaret liked thick cut. Each Thursday at Morrison's, I would put both jars into the trolley without thinking. More than once I reached the checkout before realizing what I had done. I never returned the second jar. That felt worse somehow. My days became organized. Breakfast at 7:30. A walk to the newsagent. Coffee at the same table, in a small cafe near the high street. Gardening if the weather behaved. Television in the evening until I fell asleep in the armchair. The routine kept the hours moving. It did not make them meaningful. Helen rang every few days. She was kind, but always busy. Taking your tablets. Dad. Yes. Boiler's still behaving. So far. Need me to bring anything over? No. Love. I'm fine. I knew she cared. She had work, a husband, and 2 teenagers who needed lifts. Money and attention in different proportions every week. I did not want to become another item on her list. So I always said I was fine. At the village hall coffee morning, people encouraged me to join things. A walking group, a coach holiday, a local history society. I tried the walking group once. Everyone seemed pleasant enough. But they had arrived in pairs. Husbands and wives. Sisters. Old friends who already had years of shared stories. I spent most of the morning walking beside a man called Peter, who spoke almost entirely about replacement windows. After that, I booked a weekend in Whitby. I canceled 2 days before going. The thought of sitting alone at breakfast while couples discussed their plans for the day was more than I could face. One Sunday, Helen brought the family round. For a few hours, the bungalow sounded alive again. Cupboards opened. Chairs scraped. Daniel and his sister argued over a charging plug. Margaret would have loved it. Then, shortly after 5, they all left. I stood in the doorway and watched Helen's car disappear. When I returned to the sitting room, I found Daniel's charging cable beneath the sofa. I picked it up and held it for a moment. It was the only evidence anyone had been there. That evening, I sat beside Margaret's photograph. I'm not unhappy. Love, I said. The words sounded unconvincing in the empty room. I'm just not part of anything anymore. Several days later, while reading the news online, I noticed an advertisement. Friendship, conversation, and companionship for people over 60. I closed the page, then reopened it. I told myself I was not looking for romance. I did not want excitement. I did not want promises. I only wanted someone to ask how my day had been after 6 o'clock. I created a profile and nearly deleted it twice before saving. For several evenings, nothing happened. Then one small message appeared. At the time, it looked harmless, almost ordinary. But would that innocent message reopen my life, or expose the loneliness I had tried so hard to hide? The message arrived on a Wednesday evening. I remember because I had just finished washing up after a rather disappointing shepherd's pie and was deciding whether it was too early to switch on the television. Her name was Claire Morgan. Her profile photograph showed a woman in her early 60s with silver blonde hair, kind eyes, and a natural smile. There was no glamorous background, no heavy makeup, and no attempt to look younger than she was. That made me trust the photograph before I trusted the woman. Her message read, "I noticed the photograph at Fountains Abbey. My mother used to take us there when we were children. Do you still go often?" I looked at the picture on my own profile. Helen had taken it the previous summer. I was standing beside a crumbling stone arch, squinting into the sunlight in the same brown jacket I had owned for years. There was nothing romantic about it. That helped too. I waited nearly 10 minutes before replying. Not as often as I should. It's still one of my favorite places. Her answer came a few minutes later. Mine too. Though I suspect it looks better in memory than it does in the rain. I smiled. Everything in Yorkshire looks better in the rain. We've had enough practice. That was how it began. Not with declarations or compliments. Just Fountains Abbey in bad weather. Claire told me she had grown up near Ripon, but moved south after marrying. Her husband had died 7 years earlier, and she had been living alone ever since. At present, she said, and she was working temporarily in southern France as a private care coordinator for elderly British residents. She missed Yorkshire. The rain, the hills, property. People here are very kind. She told me during one of our first telephone calls. But nobody understands that milk cannot simply be poured in whenever they fancy. I laughed more loudly than the remark deserved. It had been a long time since anyone had made me laugh at the end of an ordinary day. Our first conversations were cautious. I told her about my garden. She told me about an elderly couple she was helping. I mentioned that my tomatoes had refused to ripen. The next evening, she asked whether I had moved them closer to the glass. She remembered small things that mattered. When I spoke about Margaret, Claire never became uncomfortable. She asked what Margaret had been like. I told her about the blue dressing gown, the thick-cut marmalade, and the way she always insisted she knew the crossword answer before I did. What was her favorite song? Claire asked. I told her. There was a pause. Then she said quietly, 43 years cannot be replaced. Nor should they be. That sentence reached me in a place compliments never could. Claire did not pretend my past had ended because she had appeared. She seemed willing to sit beside it. Soon, we were exchanging messages every evening. Then came phone calls. Her voice was warm and careful, though the connection often crackled or faded. Sometimes, I had to ask her to repeat herself. When I suggested a video call, she apologized and said the internet at her accommodation was unreliable. It drops every few minutes, she said. You'll only end up staring at half my face. She sent short recorded videos instead. In one, she waved from a balcony with pale buildings behind her. In another, she walked past a row of shuttered windows and said, Look, Arthur. Not a cloud anywhere. You'd hate it. The clips lasted only seconds. Still, I saw her move. I heard her speak. That felt like proof. Claire never asked about my savings. She asked about my life, my years on the railway, winter night shifts, the first dance Margaret and I had shared, the morning Helen was born. Before Claire rang, I began making notes of things I wanted to tell her. I started cooking proper meals again because she always asked what I had eaten. Once, I admitted I had settled for beans on toast. She sighed. Arthur Bennett. That is not an evening meal. The next day I bought vegetables, chicken, and a new shirt. The shirt was for our first planned live video call. I changed twice before sitting at the kitchen table, feeling faintly ridiculous. The call failed after less than a minute. Claire's image appeared, froze, and vanished. She rang by voice instead. I'm so sorry, she said. You must think I'm hopeless. I was disappointed, but she sounded so genuinely upset that I found myself comforting her. It doesn't matter. We'll try again. That night, before ending the call, her voice softened. I had forgotten what it felt like to look forward to hearing someone's voice. Afterwards, I remained at the kitchen table in the dark. For the first time in years, someone was waiting for tomorrow with me. But one question had begun to form quietly beneath all that hope. Why could the woman who shared every detail of her heart never stay visible on a screen for more than a few seconds over the next 4 months? Claire became woven into the ordinary shape of my days. Her good morning message often arrived before I had even opened the curtains. Gray skies again. Or times, have you fed those demanding robins yet? By breakfast. I had usually sent her a photograph of something small and unremarkable. Snow resting on the garden shed. The market square in Knaresborough before the shops opened. A quiet bench in Valley Gardens with rain shining on the wooden slats. Walls. I photographed the little table in the cafe where I sat most mornings. That's where we'll have our first coffee. I wrote. Her reply came almost at once. Then save the seat opposite you. It was not grand romance. That was exactly why it felt real. Claire began talking more often about returning to England. She said the work in France had exhausted her. Too many temporary contracts. Too many borrowed rooms. Too many goodbyes to people she had cared for. I want somewhere permanent. She told me one evening. A little stone cottage. Nothing fancy. Just a garden. A proper kitchen and neighbors who complain about the weather. You'll fit in perfectly up here. Will I? You'll need training. What sort? How to bring the washing in before the rain starts. She laughed. Then, perhaps you'll have to teach me. After that, she started sending links to cottages. Pateley Bridge. Skipton. Thirsk. We looked at them together over the telephone while I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Most were beyond what she said she could afford. Some were too isolated. Others had no bus service, which concerned her because she did not want to rely on me for every journey. Then, one evening, she sent me photographs of a cottage outside, what she described as a small Yorkshire village. Gray stone walls, wooden beams across the kitchen ceiling, a narrow garden with a bench beneath the window. There was even a spare room where Claire said she could keep her sewing machine. It's not enormous, she said. It doesn't need to be. There's a bus stop nearby. That's useful. And a pub within walking distance. Essential. We began discussing it as though the place already belonged to her. I imagined fixing a loose cupboard door, driving her to the garden center, arguing over whether a bookcase should go in the sitting room or the hall, introducing her to Helen over Sunday lunch. I imagined Christmas without setting only one place at the table. The pictures in my head were so ordinary that they never felt like fantasy. Claire said she had spoken to the landlord and that the property could be held until her return. When I offered to help with the deposit, she refused immediately. No. Arthur. It was only an offer. I need you to understand something. Her voice became firm. I am not interested in your bungalow, your pension, or your savings. I want my own home. My own independence. I felt slightly embarrassed for offering. But more than that, I felt reassured. A woman trying to use me would surely have accepted. Her refusal became evidence I stored away whenever doubt appeared. A few days later, she sent a photograph of a train timetable from London to York. One date had been circled in blue ink. 6 weeks away. By then, I should be finished here. She wrote. I stared at that date for a long time. The following morning, I bought 2 concert tickets in Harrogate, a small classical performance at the theater Margaret and I had attended years earlier. I said nothing to Claire. I wanted it to be a surprise. That Sunday, I told Helen I had met someone. She went quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. That's wonderful. Dad, she's moving back to Yorkshire. When do we meet her? Soon. Helen hesitated. Have you had a proper video call yet? I felt my shoulders tighten. Her internet is dreadful. I'm not criticizing. She's working long hours as well. I only want you to be careful. The words irritated me, though she had spoken them gently. That evening, I told Claire about the conversation. I expected her to become defensive. Instead, she was silent for several seconds. Your daughter is right to protect you, she said at last. She doesn't know you. No. And I hope one day she'll understand I am not trying to take Margaret's place. It was the perfect answer. Any remaining discomfort I felt seemed to disappear. A week later, another photograph arrived. Two mugs sat beside a window. One had Arthur printed across it. The other said Claire, "For our first morning in Yorkshire." She wrote. I printed the photograph at home and placed it beside my bed. Each night. It was the last thing I saw before switching off the lamp. By then, Claire had spent months refusing every offer of financial help. So when the first real crisis came, I did not see manipulation. I saw the woman I trusted finally allowing me to help. But why? After insisting she wanted nothing from me, was she suddenly facing a problem that only my money could solve? The first change was Claire's return date. She had been due back in England in 6 weeks. Then one of the elderly residents she cared for became seriously ill. "I cannot leave her now," Claire said. "Not when she has nobody else." I was disappointed, but I understood. If anything, it made me admire her more. A few days later, she told me her British mobile number would stop working for a while. There was some problem with the contract, she said, and she would have to use different applications until it was sorted. After that, her calls began arriving from unfamiliar numbers. Sometimes the connection was clear. Sometimes her voice sounded distant and oddly distorted. On certain evenings, her accent seemed exactly as I remembered it. Soft, educated, with traces of Yorkshire still beneath it. On others, it was harder to place. Once, she sounded distinctly northern. The following evening, almost not at all. "You sound different tonight," I said. She laughed. "That's what living abroad does to you. I've spent so long speaking slowly for other people that I no longer know what I sound like." It was a reasonable explanation. I accepted it. Around that time, a birthday card I had sent to her accommodation in France was returned. The envelope came through my letterbox with a printed label saying the address could not be confirmed. When I told Claire, she sounded annoyed rather than worried. "The manager has started refusing international post," she said. "Some ridiculous security rule. That seems rather extreme." "Everything there is extreme. Don't send anything else for now." She gave me another address. Then, 2 days later, asked me not to use that one either, because she might be moved to different accommodation. I wrote both addresses on a piece of paper and left it beside the telephone. For the first time, I noticed that I was keeping track of her explanations. One evening, while we were speaking, I heard several voices behind her. Not the quiet sounds of a private room, more like a busy office or a crowded shared space. A man said something I could not make out. Then, I thought I heard him say, "Claire." "Who's that?" I asked. There was a brief silence. "I'm in the staff residence." "Someone called your name." "One of the residents has fallen. I have to go." The line disconnected. The next morning, she apologized and said the night had been chaotic. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Then I noticed something in the cottage photographs. The garden was bright and green. There were leaves on the trees and flowers near the wall. Yet Claire had said the pictures were taken that week, during a cold February in Yorkshire. When I mentioned it, she answered immediately. The estate agent must have sent older promotional photographs. Again. Possible. Again. Enough. Daniel visited the following Saturday. He found me at the kitchen table looking through Claire's profile. "Is that her?" he asked. "Yes. She looks nice." "She is." He sat beside me while I played one of the short videos Claire had sent. She was walking past pale buildings, smiling into the camera. Daniel watched it twice. "Granddad, have you ever spoken to her live on video?" "We've tried." He leaned closer to the screen. "Her mouth doesn't quite match the sound." I felt irritation rise before I could stop it. "You young people think everything online is suspicious." "I'm only saying it looks edited." "She has poor reception." Daniel nodded. "All right. Sorry." But before leaving, I noticed him glance once more at Claire's profile name. That night, I asked her directly for a live video call. Her reaction surprised me. So now you don't trust me. That isn't what I said. Your family has put this into your head. I only want to see you properly. Her voice softened. I've had dental treatment. My face is swollen, and I look dreadful. I immediately felt ashamed. I'm sorry. We'll do it next week. I promise. The following morning, I ordered flowers for her. Several hours later, the florist refunded the payment. The address did not exist. When I rang Claire, she said there must have been a mistake in the postcode. I began asking which part was wrong. Before I could finish, she started crying. Arthur, something terrible has happened. I forgot the flowers. I forgot the address. What is it? The landlord is giving the cottage to someone else. My chest tightened. He cannot do that. He can unless I make the payment within 48 hours. For months, Claire had refused every offer of money. Now the Yorkshire future we had imagined was apparently about to disappear. Was this the moment her true intentions were finally showing? Or was I about to abandon the woman I loved when she genuinely needed me? Claire did not ask for the full amount straight away. At first, she said the cottage could still be saved with £2. Babe, a holding deposit, legal translation fees, a short-term storage payment for her belongings, a final charge connected to the tenancy agreement. The explanation came in pieces, as though she were almost too embarrassed to say it all at once. My own account is temporarily restricted, she said. I'm closing everything here before I return. How long until it is sorted? 10 days at most. Then she became quiet. Forget I asked. What? I would rather lose the cottage than make you doubt me. The words caught me off guard. She had spent months refusing my offers of help. Even now, when she appeared desperate, she was trying to withdraw the request. That did not feel like pressure. It felt like pride. Claire, I said. I offered because I want to help. No. Arthur, you said the money will be returned. It will. Then let me do this. She hesitated for several seconds before giving me the account details. The name was not hers. It belonged to a property consultant who, she said, was handling the rental. I noticed it, but did not challenge her. People used agents every day. The following morning, I transferred £2. Babe, within hours, Claire sent me a digital receipt. The cottage, she said, was secure. Her relief seemed genuine. You have saved our future, she whispered. I remember feeling useful. That may sound like a small thing, but after Margaret died, nobody truly needed me. Helen checked on me. Daniel helped me with technology. Neighbors offered to carry things. Claire was different. She made me feel I could still protect someone. Several days later, another problem appeared. Her belongings had supposedly been held at customs because jewelry belonging to her family had not been properly declared. She needed £6. Sube. This time, I questioned her. Why would personal possessions from France be stopped like that? The shipment was routed through a private storage company after a documentation error. That seems odd. I know. She sent forms bearing stamps, signatures, and official-looking headings. There were spelling mistakes in places, but I assumed they had been written by people whose first language was not English. I made the transfer. After that, the amounts grew. £9, 700 for an insurance bond, £14, 000 to settle an old employment contract, £18, 500 for a legal guarantee. Each crisis arrived just as Claire was supposedly close to returning. Each payment was described as the last. Whenever I hesitated, she did not shout. She became hurt, quiet, afraid. That was harder to resist. I began moving money from the savings account Margaret and I had shared. For 2 days, I could not bring myself to press the final button. I kept seeing Margaret at the kitchen table, writing figures into a small notebook while telling me not to waste money on things we did not need. Then I told myself I was not wasting her legacy. I was using it to avoid spending the rest of my life alone. When the bank telephoned to confirm the unusual transactions, Claire coached me beforehand. Tell them it is connected to property arrangements. That is the truth. Isn't it? Of course. But banks interfere when older customers form relationships online. Her tone became bitter. They will speak to you as though you cannot make your own decisions. That touched something in me. I had spent my working life responsible for railway signals and the safety of hundreds of passengers. I had managed a mortgage, raised a family, and cared for Margaret through illness. I was not incapable. When the bank called, I said the payments were for property matters. Then came the final request, £74. Lube. Claire said a legal charge had been placed against her late husband's estate. Once it was cleared, she would receive more than £300. 0, 0, 0, and travel north immediately. I refused. I cannot send that much. I understand. I have already done more than I should. Yes. Her calmness unsettled me more than anger would have. Then she disappeared. No massage, no call that evening. Almost an entire day passed. When the voice note finally arrived, she was sobbing. They have threatened me with arrest. I sat upright in the armchair. What? If this is not settled, I may not be allowed to leave. Her breathing became uneven. Then she said, very softly, perhaps it would be easier if I simply vanished from your life. Panic rose through me. Don't say that. You have done enough. Claire, I'm sorry. Arthur. The recording ended. I played it again. Then a third time. By 9 the next morning. I had booked an appointment at the bank. The figure on the form frightened me, but the thought of losing Claire frightened me more. Would I risk everything I had left to save her, or lose the woman I loved by finally saying no? Daniel had not forgotten Claire. While I was telling myself that the final payment would solve everything, he was quietly checking the details I had dismissed. He used reverse image searches, old social media pages, and archived photographs. By early evening, he had found the woman in Claire's profile picture. She was a retired teacher living in New Zealand. Her name was not Claire Morgan. The photograph had been online for years. Daniel showed Helen first. She rang me twice, but I did not answer. I was at the dining table, sorting bank statements, transfer references, and the documents Claire had sent. At 7:30, a car stopped outside. Helen and Daniel appeared at the door before I had time to put the paperwork away. Helen looked pale. Dad, we need to speak to you. Can it wait? No. She stepped into the kitchen and saw the forms spread across the table. Her eyes settled on the figure at the top. £74,600. I gathered the papers together. That is private. How much have you already sent? I said it is private. Daniel remained near the doorway, holding his laptop against his chest. Helen pulled out a chair. Please sit down. I am already in my own house. You do not need to manage me. No one is trying to manage you. That is exactly what this feels like. Her voice shook slightly. I am not worried because you are old. Dad, I am worried because someone has studied your loneliness and learned how to use it. The words stung, not because I believed them, because part of me feared she might be right. Claire is real, I said. Daniel opened his laptop. Grandad. The photograph is not hers. He turned the screen towards me. There was Claire's face. The same smile. The same silver blonde hair. But beside it was another name and a page belonging to a woman on the other side of the world. I shook my head. This proves nothing. It proves the photograph was taken from someone else. Or it proves someone stole Claire's photograph. Helen closed her eyes briefly. Dad, listen to yourself. I reached for my phone. You want proof? I have her voice. I played one of Claire's messages. Her voice filled the kitchen. Soft, afraid, telling me she could not face another night trapped abroad. When it ended, I looked at them. That is a real person. Daniel answered gently. A real voice does not mean a real identity. I felt anger rise through me. You come here with your searches and your theories. But she has spoken to me every day. Helen flinched. So have I? No, you haven't. The room went still. I knew I had hurt her. But the words kept coming. You ring to ask about tablets and boilers. You visit when it fits around everything else. Claire asks how I am. Helen looked down at the table. You are right. I had expected an argument. Instead, she said, I have been absent. Her eyes filled. I turned our conversations into a list of things to check. I am sorry. For a moment, my anger weakened. Then she added, but my guilt does not make Claire honest. Daniel brought up another page. The Yorkshire cottage appeared on the screen. Only it was advertised as a holiday rental in the Cotswolds. I stared at the photograph. The landlord may own several properties. Daniel clicked again. Northbridge, Global Logistics. Registered 3 months earlier. Its address was a mailbox in Birmingham. No warehouse. No named directors I recognized. No connection to France or Yorkshire. Something inside me began to loosen. Not break. Not yet. But loosen. Then my phone rang. Claire. I answered immediately. Arthur. What is happening? Helen's voice carried across the kitchen. Ask her where the cottage is. Claire went quiet. My family is here. I said. You told them. They are concerned. They will never accept me. That is not fair. They think I am after your money. Helen held out her hand. Let me speak to her. I hesitated. Then passed over the phone. Helen's voice was calm. Hello. Claire. I am Arthur's daughter. What is the name of the village where you have rented the cottage? The call ended. No explanation. No goodbye. Nothing. Seconds later, a message appeared. I cannot do this while your family is attacking me. Send the money tomorrow or I am gone. Helen read it over my shoulder. That is not love. Dad, give me the phone. She placed it down. Daniel closed his laptop. Helen took an old photograph from her handbag and laid it beside the transfer papers. Margaret and me at the seaside. Helen between us. Daniel. As a small boy sitting on my shoulders. Dad, she said, you do not have to choose between being loved and being protected. I could not answer. I told them both to leave. Helen kissed my cheek before going. I did not look at her. That night, the bungalow felt colder than it had in years. At 3 in the morning, my phone vibrated. Claire had sent a photograph of a hospital wristband. Her name was printed across it. There was a date. A barkwedge. Enough detail to look official. Beneath it, she had written, they have taken me in. Please help me. I sat alone in the dark, staring at the screen until dawn. By 7, I had made my decision. I would attend the bank appointment. But was the hospital photograph proof that Claire was genuinely in danger, or the final weapon designed to silence every doubt I had left? By the time I reached the bank, I had barely slept. The rain had started before dawn and followed me into Harrogate, tapping steadily against the branch windows, as though it had nowhere else to go. Mrs. Patel greeted me by name. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. I handed her the folder of documents. She did not look at the amount first. She looked at me. You seem tired. I'm all right. It was the answer I had given Helen for years. Mrs. Patel led me into a private office and closed the door. The transfer form was already waiting on the desk. £74. Lube. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I did not take it out. Mrs. Patel folded her hands. Before we discuss the payment, could you explain what the money is for? I repeated Claire's story. The legal charge. Her late husband's estate. The belongings being held. The threat of arrest. The cottage in Yorkshire. Mrs. Patel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked, have you met Ms. Morgan in person? No. Have you spoken to her on a live video call? We've tried. The connection is poor where she is. So you have never had a full, uninterrupted live conversation where you could both see each other. I looked down. No. She nodded towards the account details. And the money is being sent to Northbridge Global Logistics rather than to Ms. Morgan. They are acting on her behalf. Have you independently contacted the company? No. Claire has dealt with them. Mrs. Patel turned towards her computer. Our fraud system has raised concerns about this destination account. My mouth went dry. What sort of concerns? I cannot discuss other customers' private information. But the payment pattern and account connections resemble previous reports. Claire said banks would do this. Do what? Interfere. Treat me as though I'm incapable of making my own decisions. Mrs. Patel's expression did not change. I do not think you are incapable. Mr. Bennett. Then process the transfer. I may still do that. But first, may I ask you something unusual? I waited. What color is the front door of the cottage? Ms. Morgan says she has rented in Yorkshire. The question seemed almost ridiculous. I don't know. You've seen photographs. Many. Of the kitchen. Yes. The garden. Yes. The village. She has described it. But not the front door. I tried to picture the cottage. Gray stone. Wooden beams. The green garden. The bench beneath the window. Nothing else came. Mrs. Patel turned her screen towards me. The cottage appeared. Claire's cottage. Only the page did not describe a Yorkshire village. It was a holiday rental in the Cotswolds. The photograph had been copied from the website. I stared at it. That could be a mistake. It could. She may have been sent the wrong pictures. That is possible. Her careful answers made the fear worse. My phone vibrated again. This time I looked. Have you sent it? Please answer me. Mrs. Patel noticed the hospital wristband photograph inside my folder. May I see that? I passed her the phone. She enlarged the image. The date is written month first. What does that mean? That format is generally American. It would be unusual on a French or British hospital wristband. She pointed to the logo. Then she searched for it online. Within moments, the same design appeared on a website selling medical image templates. I felt heat rise into my face. She sent that to me last night. I'm sorry. No. Her voice was frightened. The person speaking to you may be real. She is real. The identity may not be. I gripped the edge of the desk. For months, I had allowed Claire's voice to settle into every empty room in my life. Now Mrs. Patel was asking me to accept that the voice might belong to somebody else, or several people, with my permission. She contacted the bank's fraud department. The final transfer was placed on hold. The advisor on the telephone explained that several of my earlier payments had already been moved through different accounts. Recovery was uncertain. The words seemed to come from a great distance. Mrs. Patel asked whether there was someone I trusted who could join me. For a moment, pride almost made me say no. Then I called Helen. She and Daniel arrived 20 minutes later. I could not look at them. I expected anger, question, perhaps even relief that they had been proved right. Daniel sat beside me without speaking. Helen reached across the desk and took my hand. My voice broke. I thought she chose me. Helen held on more tightly. That is what they wanted you to believe. A fraud investigator joined us by telephone. He described the pattern, mirroring my interests, avoiding live video, planning a shared future, refusing money at first, creating repeated emergencies, making me distrust my family, building urgency before the largest transfer. Every detail felt like someone reading my private life aloud. Lauter. Police traced several calls to an organized fraud operation using multiple identities. The photographs were stolen. The short videos were either reused footage or made by someone paid to appear briefly. The voice messages had not all been sent by the same person, the person who knew about Margaret. My railway years. And the empty chair in the cafe may never have been one person at all. Other victims had received nearly identical messages. A widow in Devon had lost her house deposit. A retired man in Lancashire had sent most of his pension lump sum. I agreed to hand over everything. Message, recordings, receipts, photographs. Before the police took my phone, it vibrated. One final time. Arthur, they are lying to you. Call me privately, and I will prove everything. The room fell silent. My thumb hovered above her name. Even then, after everything I had seen, part of me wanted to hear her voice. Would I finally break Claire's hold over me? Or answer the person who had made me feel alive again? I did not call Claire. For the first time since her name had appeared on my screen. I placed the phone face down and left it there. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. A part of me expected her to ring again with some final explanation that would make everything sensible. Another part already understood that no explanation could repair what I had seen in the bank. Under police guidance, I continued replying for a short while. Brief messages. Nothing personal. Nothing that might warn whoever was behind the account that an investigation had begun. At first, Claire returned to the voice I knew. Arthur, please trust me. Your family has frightened you. We are so close to being together. When I did not respond as warmly as before, her tone changed. After everything I shared with you, this is how you treat me. Then, Helen has manipulated you. A few hours later, another message arrived. I have copies of everything you sent me. Private things. Do not force me to use them. I read it twice. There was no tenderness left in those words. No frightened woman waiting to return to Yorkshire. Only pressure. For months, I had believed Claire's gentleness appeared whenever she felt safe enough to reveal it. Now I saw the truth. The gentleness had been a tool. When it stopped working, she reached for fear. I sat at the kitchen table and typed slowly. You did not love me. You loved the silence in my house because you thought no one would hear what you were doing. I did not expect an answer. None came. Within an hour, the account disappeared. Her photograph vanished. The messages remained on my phone. But the woman at the other end had gone as though she had never existed. The bank managed to freeze part of the money from one of the most recent transfers. After weeks of forms, statements, and telephone calls, approximately £21, 000, was returned to me. I was grateful. I also knew how much remained missing. For a while, I could not look at my bank statements without hearing Margaret's voice in my head, not accusing me. That might have been easier. I heard her asking whether I was all right. The rest of the money stayed under investigation. Months later, police informed me that several arrests had been made in connection with a fraud network using intermediaries in Britain and abroad. Some accounts had been opened by people paid to receive and move stolen funds. Others belonged to companies that existed only on paper. I asked the detective whether they had found Claire. He was quiet for a moment. We may never identify the person you believed you were speaking to. That hurt more than I expected. There would be no final meeting. No courtroom moment where Claire looked at me and admitted what she had done. No apology. No single face I could attach to the betrayal. Justice, I learned, is not always a door closing neatly. Sometimes it is simply fewer people being harmed. My messages helped investigators connect several victims to the same network. They told me my evidence had prevented at least 3 further transfers. One of them had been for more than £50,000. Mrs. Patel later telephoned and asked whether I would speak anonymously at a fraud awareness event in the village hall. My first answer was no. I don't want people knowing. They do not need your name. They will still know it was someone like me. That may be exactly why they listen. I refused again. Then she told me about another victim, a 74-year-old widower who had not told his children because he was too ashamed. I recognized that silence. A week later, I agreed. The village hall was full when I arrived. People I knew from the cafe, neighbors, retired couples, men and women who had spent their whole lives believing they could recognize dishonesty when they saw it. My hand shook as I stood at the front. For a few seconds, I could not speak. Then I said, I was not fooled because I was stupid. The room became still. I was fooled because I was lonely. And someone treated my loneliness as a business opportunity. Nobody laughed. A woman in the second row lowered her head. A man near the door quietly wiped his eyes. I told them about the cottage, the hospital wristband, the money, the messages that had made me feel necessary again. Afterwards, an elderly woman waited until everyone else had moved away. She showed me her phone. A man claiming to be an engineer was supposedly stranded overseas and needed help paying a customs charge. The messages were warm. Passion. Familiar. I recognized the pattern immediately. Together. We blocked the account. She had not sent a penny. As she thanked me, something inside me shifted. I had lost money, trust, the future I had imagined. But by telling the truth, I had recovered something I thought had gone with Claire. My dignity. The question that remained was harder. After losing the life I had built in my head, could I create a real one that no longer depended on a voice behind a screen? Several months later, my life had not become suddenly exciting. The bungalow was still quiet in the evenings. I still missed Margaret when I reached for 2 mugs instead of 1. Or heard a song she used to hum while making Sunday lunch. Some losses do not disappear. They simply stop filling every corner of the room. Helen began visiting each Sunday. Not to inspect the boiler. Not to count my tablets. She came because she wanted to be there. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we argued over how much salt belonged in the gravy. Sometimes we sat in the conservatory and said very little. Those were often the best visits. Daniel helped me join a local history group. He also showed me how to check photographs online and how to recognize the small warning signs I had once explained away. Nothing wrong with trusting people. Grandad, he said. You just need to give trust somewhere to stand. I thought about that sentence for days. The 2 concert tickets I had bought for Claire remained in the kitchen drawer. I nearly threw them away several times. In the end, when the evening finally arrived, I asked Helen to come with me. She looked surprised. I thought those were meant to be a surprise for someone else. They were. And now they're 2 perfectly good seats. The theater was warm and crowded. For the first time, I noticed how many people had come alone. With friends. With sisters. With adult children. Not every empty place in a life needed to be filled by romance. When we stepped outside afterwards, light snow had begun to fall over Harrogate. Helen tucked her hands into her coat pockets. Do you think you'll ever try meeting someone again? I considered the question. Months earlier, I might have said never. Fear can feel like wisdom when you have just been hurt. But I no longer wanted Claire to decide the rest of my life. Perhaps, I said. Helen glanced at me. Perhaps. I smiled. But next time, we'll meet for tea before we plan the rest of our lives. She laughed and linked her arm through mine. At home, I went into the bedroom and looked at the photograph beside my bed. The 2 personalized mugs, Arthur and Claire. For months, they had represented a future I believed was waiting for me. Now they looked like props from somebody else's story. I removed the photograph. I did not replace it with another picture of romance. Instead, I put the old seaside photograph in its place. Margaret beside me, Helen between us, Daniel sitting on my shoulders, laughing at something beyond the edge of the frame. It was not a perfect photograph. My hair was being blown sideways, and Margaret had her eyes half closed. But everyone in it was real. The following morning, I went to my usual cafe. I carried my coffee to the table by the window and sat in the chair I had occupied for years. A few minutes later, a woman from the local history group approached. Her name was Anne. We had spoken twice about railway stations and once about whether the council should have removed an old stone marker. She nodded towards the chair opposite me. Is this seat free? For a moment, I looked at it. The empty chair. The one I had once photographed for Claire. The one I had spent years imagining someone might fill. Then I smiled. Yes, I said. It is. Anne sat down. We talked about nothing extraordinary. The weather. The history group. A bakery that had recently closed. It was ordinary. Unplanned. Real. And perhaps that was enough. How many people are not truly searching for money or even romance, but simply for someone honest to sit in the empty chair beside them? Loneliness is not foolishness. Trust is not weakness. The shame belongs to the person who exploits love, never to the person who was brave enough to hope.